Joining us now to discuss Harris's eagerly awaited interview is Mike Leon, Policy and Strategy Director at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. He's also the host of the podcast, Can We Please Talk? Mike, it's good to see you. We're seeing a lot of each other this week.
Yeah, we really are. Good to see you, Chris.
Did last night's interview change any undecided voters' minds?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, you and I were just talking about this the other day about the interview style and format and whether or not people would be upset with the outlet it was going to be on and the journalist it was going to be on. So let me give a little kudos to Dana Bash and the folks at CNN, because I think Dana did press her on a couple of different questions around her policies when she was running for president in 2019 versus her positions now. One of them was fracking, and you heard in the interview she talked about, hey, this is a key voter issue in the state of Pennsylvania, which is a swing state and 19 electoral votes, and a state that you need to win to get to the path of 270. So I think for undecided voters right now, I still didn't hear from that interview. And again, Chris, you're not going to hear it from these type of interviews unless the campaign really puts this out materials wise. If you go to KamalaHarris.com right now, you don't see these policies around the economic vision and strategy and implementation. You know, Dana asked her what she would do on day one. Things are not executable on day one. Government is a group project, so it works as a group. So there are some things that she can't actually do on day one. But I need to hear about some more of these policies that impact a wider net of folks that would be impacted by this. She mentioned the child tax credit. She mentioned the first-time home buyers things. Those are things that we already knew in terms of those price points and what that would impact those millions of Americans. We need to hear more of the economic vision and policy and strategy. So I came away from it, you know, just maybe not learning more, but wanting to learn more about it.
And I'm wondering, were there parts where you thought Harris came across particularly well? Did anything stand out to you? I mean, this election is so incredibly heated.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Look, there's a couple of different points in the interview. I think, and I just had somebody on from the Haley Voters for Harris organization that I asked a direct, hey, why you guys were for Nikki Haley, now you're shifting to Kamala Harris. Why? Give me something policy position wise. And the biggest thing that he said, and you heard a little bit in the interview from her, is that, hey, she's a former attorney general. She was, more to the right of the left wing of the Democratic Party when it came to issues around immigration and the border. She was responsible for putting away criminals at the U.S. southern border for a border state in California. She's championed that record, and she has been, her head's been chewed off by a lot of progressive Democrats, not only in the 2019 going into 2020 primary, but even other ones that have kind of brought this up now. Is she going to have those same policy positions that she did when she was running for president? It's one of those central themes that Dana kept asking her to touch on. But I think the other thing, Chris, you were asking about undecided voters, and I know for younger voters, and we saw it in the college campus protests, it's really Israel-Gaza, right? Like we all agree Israel has a right to defend themselves, but we don't agree with the way Israel is carrying out this war right now and the way they're using precision sometimes to their advantage, and then at other times just not using it to their advantage. And over 40,000 are dead in Gaza, and there's no end in sight for a lot of these folks and these families, and there's no end in sight for the hostages. So I don't think that we got clear-cut answers on that, and I know that that is something that people want answers to, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on.
Yeah, it seems like, Harris and Walz are trying to keep things at a higher level. I mean, she said, my values have not changed when pressed on these flip-flop issues, never fully resolving any of them. I'm wondering if you think she can, stay at that higher level. Does she need to talk at the policy level? Are voters going to get behind her either way?
Well, I mean, I know in these campaign stops, obviously, these longer speeches is a little bit more drilling into the policy, right? An interview is always going to be high level. There are certain things that you don't know the makeup of what the Senate and the House will be, obviously. So will she have the legislative branch in her favor come in the fall? So that's fair. But the biggest thing for me right now, and what I want to hear from a soundbite perspective that at least the campaign can put out, is drilling into the way you execute some of these things. Because, yeah, sure, it's great to say some of these things, and we've seen it all throughout different presidents, from Obama telling you can keep your doctor, right, which we found out you could not, to President Trump telling us that Mexico would pay for a wall, which did not happen. So campaign promises are one thing, Chris. Everyone does it from both sides of the political aisle. The question will be how you actually execute and implement it. And so when she's doing, whether it be smaller sessions with voters from a town hall perspective, or if she's doing larger stops on the campaign trail, I think the campaign needs to put out more content that has her drill into policy. And then B, as somebody who lives in the SEO game, right, for websites, you need to be able to put this stuff out on KamalaHarris.com. Right now, there's just no section that outlines the vision and policy on the economic front, on the immigration front, on the foreign policy conflicts that voters can go to right now to search that stuff up. If you look for it right now, you can look up her policy positions based on an article from PBS. And that's not the way the campaign should be doing it. They should be putting that more front facing for voters. And to be fair to the former President Trump has this listed on his campaign site on how he would execute some of this stuff. So I think she needs to get ahead of that, and the campaign needs to get ahead of that stuff.
Yeah, and we did hear from Democratic strategist Robin Biro a few weeks ago, saying that he wants to see more information on the website. And like you're saying, we're still waiting for that. I'm wondering about this thing that was in the headlines quite a bit. Harris talked about the time that Joe Biden called her to let her know that he was going to stepping out of the race. She was having breakfast with her family and she was doing a puzzle and she got a call from Joe Biden. I wonder, can you talk about the significance of that moment in the interview?
Yeah, I think it was a vulnerability thing, right? Because I think for a lot of us over the last couple of weeks or month, I should say, and the way the reports were coming out about how this was working behind the scenes, after that debate, you could throw papers up in the air in terms of what was happening, not only from the DNC, but on down of the Democratic Party. I remember having at least 2 to 3 members of the House on the podcast that were just regularly scheduled interviews that I had on my show, Chris. And I had to pivot questions wise because I had to ask about, what do we make of the debate performance? What do we make now of the infighting? I remember some of them telling me, there's just no way to rally around a candidate this fast. And so now that we've seen the shift and now being able to rally around a candidate this fast, I think she was able to give people a little bit of an insight of Joe Biden's career and legacy and why he did this. I mean, we could get into the infighting of the party and stuff like that and Nancy Pelosi's influence and role in all this. But I think the vulnerability part of it, of her, kind of realizing the moment, and now that somebody has to step up, right? The number 2 at the job would always be the person to step up when the CEO resigns. Al Gore ran for president back in 2000. I thought Mike Pence was going to have a longer lasting effect in the Republican Party because he was the number 2. And during the COVID-19 crisis, a lot of people turned to Mike Pence for information during those pressers, if you recall, Chris. So I thought it was a moment where she kind of reflected on Joe Biden's legacy, but then also capturing what she was thinking at the time and realizing that it was time to go to work and try to make an impact over these last 7 weeks, because a lot of people don't know her positions, and the administration wasn't really using her much outside of, obviously visiting the Triangle Nations during the immigration crisis in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras to be deployed as a border czar, if you want to call her that, in terms of that issue. So we really don't know much about Kamala Harris, at least from the national perspective. We knew more about Joe Biden, his policies. Dana asked her, would you adopt some of these in Bidenomics and some of these other things? So I thought it was a moment where she was able to encapsulate all of the emotions over the last 7 weeks and Joe Biden's impact and lasting legacy on American politics.
Well, we're certainly finding out about Harris very quickly. There's more to go, but it should be interesting watching this unfold so fast. Looking forward to the debate that you mentioned, is there anything in last night's interview that hints at how Harris might approach facing Trump? I mean, that's just on September 10th.
Yeah, good question, Chris, because, obviously Dana asked her about the personal attacks, and obviously she asked about Governor Walz's, some misstatements that he has made. And I thought he kind of answered that question, not the best. But in terms of the debate overall, I think Kamala Harris is a former prosecutor, right? You've heard Democratic strategists say this, and if you haven't, let me say it for them, about prosecuting the case against the former president, right? Because it's apropos given the legal troubles he has. And I think for her in the debate, she has to continue to do that. And I think for former President Trump, I've mentioned to you this, Chris, a bunch of times, if the Trump campaign's listening, I hope they are. your candidate has to stop talking about crowd sizes and talking about things that are hypotheticals and just deal with Kamala Harris being the incumbent right now. She's a part of this administration. She's a part of the economic woes that you are facing. All of the things that she's talking about, why hasn't any of those things been done or implemented, right? Those are the things to focus on. And again, this is just more of like looking at it from a 30,000 foot overview on how campaigns should strategize. And I think for the debate, I think both of them, if they stick to those lanes and given, the rules around the debate format and the muting of microphones and stuff like that, I think you could maybe hear an actual policy discussion, which was at the first question that you asked me, Chris, is that's what we really want to hear. We want to hear, how would you execute that? Or when you were president, former President Trump, you did this and you say you want to do this again when you become president. This is how many people it impacted. So I think those are the two things that I would, for each campaign, if I was advising either of them, tell them to have their candidate focus on come September 10th.